Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to disaster recovery, business continuity, resilience, COVID, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can reach out and find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Alex Fullick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. Alternatively, you can find me at alexfullick.com, and I'll reach out to you and we'll see about getting you on the show. Longtime listeners know that I was presenting at the Continuity and Resilience Today conference in Toronto in early December in last year, I believe it was, and that my hope was to be able to get a couple of those presenters to come on the show. Well, today I've been able to do that. And I'm really happy to have him here because I've read lots of his articles. So it's really great to have him on the show and talk about different subjects. And I'd like to welcome to the show, Vito Mangialardi. Did I say the name right, Vito?
Thanks, Alex. It's Mangialardi, but you get Mangialardi, you get A+ for effort.
Okay, good. Woo. Vito, how you doing?
Very well, thank you. I'm happy that you're having me here today so I can share some of my thoughts and ideas around the concepts of business continuity.
Now, I know you and I've had a conversation, exchanged a couple of emails, but just in case somebody out there isn't quite sure who Vito is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do?
Sure. So I'm currently employed by Metrolinx, which is a transit agency in the city of Toronto, commuter rail. And I worry about resiliency at Metrolinx to ensure that we have our passengers are safe, our staff are safe, and we have a transit system that operates on time and meets the expectations of our passengers. Historically, I've been in business continuity officially since Y2K. For those that can remember that, I have a life sentence to business continuity. I've actually written an article on that, and I really enjoy this practice. It's up and down depending on what's going on out there and who your management team is. But I think we have an opportunity through COVID to really deliver a message on the value business continuity has to all sizes of organizations.
I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on a few things. So why don't we jump into our list of topics, because you're going to be giving us some thoughts on thought leadership. Actually, let's put it that way, on business continuity management. So let's start with the first one. What are your thoughts on policy?
Well, just before I get into that, Alex, I just want to mention that in our discussions today, I may use incident, crisis, disaster, emergency. They're all interchangeable. They kind of mean the same thing, that business is being disrupted, right? And I think that's really important to consider. So a policy is really important to me because it's a commitment of the organization that they plan to manage risk, and they also plan to commit to a structured program, if you wish, because everybody knows that a business continuity program by itself is putting in place these procedures to ensure we mitigate the disruption of the business when events are occurring. And the policy statement is really good to set the tone for how the business should behave through this whole process. I kind of call it the thou shalt do, when, who, why, when kind of document. Sort of it lays everything out that says this is what we're going to do. So the policy should be adopted, obviously, by management, the whole management. It could even be the board, and it definitely needs an executive sponsor to own that policy. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be very, very high level, as long as it comes has the right information in there. It talks about the framework, talks about roles and responsibilities. It names, who the executive sponsor is and what their particular role is. And it's part of the journey that organizations need to take. I use this expression that organizational resiliency or operational resiliency is this destination that we want to get to, but we can definitely leverage business continuity planning and these policies and these mechanisms to ensure that the organization is doing the right things to assure that resiliency actually kicks in. Now, a policy by itself isn't much fun unless you have the right people in the organization that are supporting that policy. And that's why it talks about policy talks about who's involved. It sets the priorities along with what we're focusing in on, because business continuity isn't about everything we do. It's about the things that are time sensitive when an incident is occurring, and these are the things we must preserve. So the policy really helps set the stage for that. And also, the policy is very important when we talk about auditing, because we're going to talk about auditing later, because the policy is something that an auditor looks at and says, is the organization doing these things that management have agreed that we are going to do when we're thinking about resiliency in mind? So I personally would not, a policy is a nice to have, or let's say it's a must have. If I was joining an organization that did not have a policy or an executive sponsor, that to me, wearing my risk hat, would be a red flag that the commitment isn't there to deliver the work. So I'd be very cautious about that. And in my current role, we, starting with a blank sheet of paper, one of the very first deliverables I wanted was that business continuity policy from management, signed, sealed, and delivered. Another thing about a policy that really helps, you can put things in the policy that help you as the practitioner. For example, we're going to report back every couple of months, with the progress to plan. We can define that KPI, because the more management can commit to the policy and what's in that policy that drives the program, then you can never be faulted. I don't want to use that word in a negative way, but it helps guide. That's what the policy is about, guide you down that path so that you are doing the right things that would generally pass an internal or external audit. And I'm very evidence-based, and I'll close off by saying two things. One is, I don't want to be in the witness stand without a policy in my hand. And Alex, I think you wrote this in 2011, and I'm going to read this, and I totally agree with you. You said a policy shows that a company will prepare for, respond to, and recover from any situation that it encounters to ensure public safety and employee safety. And that, that's so foundational, because safety is first in every policy. If you talked about revenue in your policies being first and you were in the courtroom, you're going to jail, bottom line.
Yep, I agree with that one for sure. I have no idea if I wrote that or not. I may have.
Oh, you did write it.
I did. I'll have to ask you during our break where, because it doesn't ring a bell.
You are very famous, sir.
So let's go to our next one. A mature model. What's a mature program look like?
So this is a very interesting one, because firstly, I believe that maturity is really based to organizational culture and the people that do the work. And I think you need to work on behaviors of staff to really get an effective business continuity program in place. And a business continuity program, which is why they call it a program, is something that takes time. And I've done this several times. And to think that in year 1, year 2, year 4, you're there, you might be there in year 4, but unless you're trending the performance over time, you're really not there. So maturity to me is something that like a good wine, it needs to come together nicely over a period of time. And maturity for organizations comes in a lot of different flavors, because some are big companies, some are small companies. As you know, you have the every man or person for themselves when crisis strikes, or you have a very formalized business continuity program where you've adopted a standard, for example, right? And you're following it exactly to a T, and you've got continuous improvement built in. So those are really good types of things to see inside the program. And maturity also goes with that policy, commitment and management. And you have to make sure that in that time, in that program, that you are doing the right things, you're growing. So my suggestion with maturity is that you start easy and you make it more challenging as you go along. A great example of that would be, I like sports, and if I was coaching, which I've done in the past, my team would play a team that I know they could beat, and they start to build confidence. But then every now and then I'd bring a team along that they would lose against, and then they realize that their strategies, their game strategy, needs to be adjusted based on what's happening in the field. And this is, the same thing with business continuity and maturity. You've got your frameworks, you've got your policies, but you really need to adjust them to the best of your ability. Now, within your within a mature program, you really need to have KPIs, right? And we're going to talk about KPIs later, but this is also embedded in your policy. And I'm going to say, Alex, everything we're talking about kind of overflows into the next topic. It's all connected. Like, you can't do things alone. There's the easy way and the right way. And I always like to believe that we got to do it the right way, right? Evidence-based program, right? So you have to have KPIs, which are really, helps measure your program, your maturity year in and year out. So you may start with a low KPI target, but as you're maturing, you're getting to a higher KPI target.
I'm going to jump in a question, because I know somebody is probably thinking this. Is a KPI a tick box? I have a plan.
Well, it can be a tick box, but at the end of the day, the KPI is something that really is measuring things that you are doing to ensure your plan is in the state of readiness. So one of the things we might say in a mature program is management, VP management, is putting their name on that plan that says, I accept that plan, and I accept any risk within that plan that it meets the required defined performance levels of my business that he owns. Now, I wouldn't call that a checkbox. That is a commitment to review and sign up to that plan, because your VPs are officers of the company. They're responsible for the business. They're fiduciary, right? So by putting their names on the plan at the end of their annual cycle is a commitment to the policy that they take ownership of that plan. So it's not, that's a really mature place to be. And at the end of the day, if they choose to sign up and the plan is inadequate, they've accepted the risk. Because we as practitioners are like teachers, mentors. We coach the business and try to think about resiliency. We give them the tools to plan. We really don't own anything except giving them the framework and helping them be successful. They own their piece of the business. They need to sign up. And by the way, Alex, if you told me that I was going to hire consultants to write plans, I'm sorry for all the consultants that may be listening to this. I don't want to work for an organization that relies on consultants to write plans, because we need to teach people how to write plans, and we need to teach people to understand business continuity. So they own that piece for their silos, for their buckets, for the work they deliver, right? So we need to make sure that they're hands-on when they all do this, because that supports culture. When you can get behavior in place and you're getting a cultural shift in place, and mature starts to happen naturally. And I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times. If we're doing our jobs right, we don't need to be here anymore. It should be embedded. It should be strategic.
Yeah, agreed. So what kind of things should we measure then? Because a lot of times, and there's been different guests and different thoughts, that people will just have a checklist. Finance has a plan, tick. We did a test, tick. And then they measure based on that. But I know from our conversations and things that I've heard you say before, we need to go beyond that. So
yeah,
what kind of things would you suggest measuring?
So we might be dipping a little bit into the KPIs, which we can do.
Sure. Yeah, let's move to that.
That's a great lead in, actually, right? So as you know, KPIs are what organizations use to measure business. And you can do exactly the same thing for a business continuity program. And what I have done surgically since I've started this practice using my project management capabilities, I've done a work breakdown of my program. Now, that all stems from the framework and the standards you follow, right? So what we do is, it's not just a checkbox to say they have a plan. Well, first of all, you do your BIA, you understand what is critical in the business that must be preserved, that is time sensitive. Now, you may have a laundry list of, and as we know, business continuity is process centric, generally speaking. So processes and functions that must be preserved. Well, are the processes and operations more important than the processes in the HR department? And I would say yes. So those processes might have a higher weighting and ranking at the end of the day. They have more value in the KPI. So I would feel much, if I was reporting progress to plan on my program, and I would, we're not 50% done, because you could have 50% of the wrong plans in place. They're not that they're wrong plans, they're just not as important than the operational plans. So then you start the weighting and ranking of the different business units and what they deliver and what they support in the business. And then on top of that, you can furthermore by saying, well, have they refreshed their plan, updated the plan? Have they created a plan? Have they exercised that plan? Have they got the VP sign off? So those now become other numerical values that get weighted just as much. So have you done these things for that particular plan? And includes that sign off that we think that is very important. And I define a KPI for a business continuity program. It's the ability or maturity to react to incidences and deliver the right responses in a timely manner to mitigate the impact. So if you have a plan, and I'll use a contact center, and I may use that a lot. If you have a customer contact center that handles 1,000 calls a day, but your business continuity plan handles 10 calls a day, yeah, you might have a plan, but it doesn't meet the performance of the business which is where the sign off comes in. So you can see it's all sort of intertwined, but it's really easy at the end of the day to figure this out. I mean, it doesn't matter if you have 10 plans or 75 plans, weight and rank them to the importance of the business. And this goes back to your policy when you were in management, because you're saying to management that when we do our KPIs, any KPI associated with safety is number one. Something that is associated with what we put out on our loading dock, what you deliver to customers and what they pay for is number two. It's all current business. Communications might be number three. And the security of assets and the privacy of information might be number four. And if we only focus on those things when an incident is occurring, then we're doing the right things. And we can measure those things. So we know there's a higher probability, keyword, that we are going to survive the incident and not have reputational damage or loss of revenue. Because those are the bonuses if you do planning right.
Right. And we also, I'm assuming we would add some sort of a testing metric in there or exercising.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah, because that's one of your typical deliveries. And by the way, testing itself, you can weight that. So it depends if you are designing the exercise for the user or they're choosing one themselves. So, hey, I'm going to do a tabletop exercise. How easy is that? So if the tabletop component of the KPI, for the sake of argument, is worth 20%, well, if they do a tabletop exercise, they may only get 5 of that 20%. But if they do a full scale exercise, they'll get 20% of the 20%. So that supports readiness, right? And we would not accept a tabletop exercise from an operational group, but we would accept a tabletop exercise if you were HR in the hiring process, not that that's an essential function, right? So right. You may pick a certain exercise for a certain group that promotes a higher weighting and a state of readiness. And to me, that's very defendable. I mean, I've been there before, and when you're creating that path or that roadmap of these things you must do that you're getting measured against, it starts to change the behaviors. Because people want to do better because they start to understand the need to do better than just having the check mark.
Well, let's take that a step further, proving that you're doing what you say you're going to do, and move into audit.
Right. That's also a very excellent topic. And, as you know, that a program audit is sort of it's a formalized method of evaluating, it's evaluating what we said we're going to do to what we actually done. And it's no different than exercises. If we talk about exercises, the way I measure an exercise is what are my expected results versus my actual results. And I find that auditing is exactly the same way. So we really want to determine whether the planning is as effective as we thought would be against policy and the organizational objectives, right? At the end of the day. So when we think about the 3 lines of defense, Alex, you've heard that before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so when you think about 3 lines of defense, the front line are the folks that actually write the plans. They're in the business. They're at the front line. They're in the trenches, right? So they're the best individuals to mitigate against disruption because they know in their head or they have SOPs, they know what to do to actually mitigate the impact. Now, we're kind of stuck in the middle. The business continuity office or the business continuity practitioner, 1, the office, 4 people. We've got the tools and the knowledge to help the front line. So we've got the policy by management. So we're forcing ourselves out there, evangelizing business continuity. Hey, if you follow these templates and you do these things, you're going to protect your work and you're going to survive and the business is going to thrive on, right? And then the auditor is where they come in at the back end and they really measure the effectiveness of the program. Are we doing what we said we're going to do? And the policy says thou shalt do. The front line said, this is what we did. And we're in the middle saying we did the best we could to get them to do what they're supposed to do, but here are the results. And the auditor will see, did they update their plan? How often? Did they exercise a plan? How difficult did we make that? Did they get the VP sign off at the day? How often did you do the BIA, right? So they'll go in and look at all those things. Now, of course, within your policy, we hope you have a standard, right? Like ISO 22301, NFPA, you pick it. They're all fundamentally the same thing. They all have the practices that are that will generally protect your business, right? So they'll look at that standard, look at the policy, then they'll dive into the work you do, and they'll take a look. And it's not so much about how many pages are in the plan, how big and heavy it is. Where I'm going, Alex, these days, and my best example is when I get on an airplane and I look at that pamphlet that's got 3 sides on it, it tells me how to get out of the plane in a real hurry. I don't read the first, it's not a book where I read about the history of aircraft and flying. And then finally back here, I understand where the exits are. So, to me, it's about, that's how it needs business continuity. That's where we're heading. And auditing, will help us, do we have the right content? Is the plan becoming difficult? Is it a user-friendly document? Is it meeting the mark? Is it truly helping the organization become resilient, right? Reactions, right? And I think about, reaction time in the pamphlet, it's we've got to be able to hit the ground running with these documents. And the auditors, if you have a good auditor that is trained and understands business continuity, you'll get the results you need. And if I can give you any advice to you, Alex, or our folks out there, and I love it when auditors show up, the first thing I say, so tell me about your business continuity experience. Because if they don't,
a lot of it has to do with an internet search.
No, but you're right. But if they say, you've heard this before, we're a big company, show me your business continuity plan. Well, organizations have dozens of plans that make up the plan, right?
Yeah.
Right. And to me, that can I get a copy of your plan? No, there's confidential information in our plan, and there's strategies in there that we use that we know are right. You need business continuity practitioners need to lead their organizations in such a way that they're leading and not following what others are doing. Let's do what they did. Now, you need to take this information, create a model that works for you, get your policy in place with framework. So then the auditors come along, they say, you are doing what you said you're going to do, and not being measured by what they are doing. And that's really important takeaway.
Yeah, I agree. And quite often too, what an auditor will, if they find a gap or something, they'll say, what are you doing about it? Why didn't you make this? You set yourself this goal, you didn't meet it. What are you doing about it to meet it? And it's, well, because we had a situation. So the priority was to get our business up and running, not to get a signature or something like that. Yeah. Oh, okay. And I can prove, here's all the calendar invites. We had meetings. Here's all the documentation from exercises. We did our tests, so we are doing, what we said we would do. And what we couldn't do, here's the reason why, and here's the proof why. So.
And that's a really interesting point, because for me, I don't really care if the VP signs off on the plan. What I care about, it's been updated, it's reflecting process, technology, people, business changes, and we've exercised it.
Yeah.
And I say that confidently because if you've been working with this family of business continuity leads out there that own the business, you start to build a trust with them, the behaviors, right?
Yeah.
When most people in the early days, they want to shunt off business continuity because they don't want to do it. Bob's doing it now. Well, I say, okay, well, if Bob's doing it, make sure your VP sends me a note that says Bob's doing it. Until then, Alex, your name is on this plan.
Yeah.
Ownership and accountability, right? I mean, and I want you, Alex, to put this in your PMP. You need to be measured by it. again, behaviors. I want your VP to assign this to you. So you put this in your personal performance for the year. So you're interested in doing the work.
Yep.
Correctly.
Yep. Agreed.
Right.
On that note, we come to the end of our first segment. We are talking with Vito Mangialardi. Said it right this time.
Doing good.
On business continuity, thought leadership, and we will be right back. Welcome back. We are talking about business continuity management, thought leadership with Vito Mangialardi. Vito, lots of great information in our first segment. Let's continue this with some of these different topics. How about, and you mentioned some of this already, exercising, virtual exercises versus real-time exercises. What are your thoughts?
So exercises are one of my favorite parts of business continuity planning. It really excites me. And I've been doing this for quite a while. And to me, virtual exercises or real-time exercises, there really isn't much different. Because at the end of the day, we're doing these exercises to make sure that these plans, are meeting the defined recovery objectives. And, and it's not like pass or fail when we think about tests, it's about performance. We're trying to understand, can we operationalize this plan if a real event occurs? And I'll use the term hit the ground running again. And can we identify some opportunities to improve them? Validate the strategies we came up in planning. Are they really going to work? Are the people that are using them, are they comfortable with them? Are they really going to produce the results that we were looking for? And I don't know if you remember this or not, but there was a great book written in 1977, and it was called The Death of Distance. And it talked about living in the internet world in the next century. And, we are living that world. It's based on that book where everything is virtual. And right now, I don't know about you, but when in my past role, I was responsible for business continuity nationally. Even the planning was done virtually. So the incidents that were occurring, we were responding to them virtually. So doing the exercise is really no different. There's a couple of great opportunities in doing these exercises virtually. You have to understand the tools, but at the end of the day, it's still no difference. You've got to have an exercise plan. You've got to be able to measure the performance of that plan. And to me, that's one of the very most important things. I go back to what are the expected results versus the actual results, and where do we find the expected results? Alex, pop quiz for you. Where should those expected results be when you think about it?
Where should the results be? Well, they should be they're in our goals and objectives. This is what I'm expecting to see. So it's documented somewhere so I can measure back.
And typically all those things you do are in your plan. And you should be, so I always use the analogy of the flat tire as well. There are 16 things you need to do to replace a tire safely. And that includes taking it back to the garage, taking the donut off, which says you can only do 80 kilometers an hour for 200 kilometers, putting your spare tire back and putting your good tire back on. Those are all the things you need to do to successfully exchange or replace the tire in your car. So if we were doing an exercise, I would be asking, virtually, so tell me the things you would need to do to change a flat tire. And they would be listing these things off. Hopefully they've read the manual in the glove box, which is your business continuity plan. And they should be saying, well, I need to do these things. And that to me is measuring. And so it doesn't matter if you're physically doing it or, it's in a virtual world. You are doing something that says, if we do these series of events, go back to the KPI we talked about that's in the policy that says our ability to respond and do the necessary actions or introduce the actions to mitigate the impact. That's what exercises are about. Now let's measure it. Are we doing those things to ensure that the business function is the RTO, if you wish, is back online as quickly as we can. Now, RTOs are always associated with the technology, but we need to introduce RTOs and exercises, because some people will also say in an exercise, well, we did exactly what we said we would do in our plan. And one thing I've introduced in our plan is time. So when you think about all these steps, well, how long did it take you to do those 16 steps? So if you said to me, well, I replaced my flat tire in a day, I'm going, well, that's not good enough. When you're on the side of the highway, you want to change your flat tire in 22 minutes and be on your way because you've got commitments, right? So you got to bring all this into your exercise to make sure that it works. Now, the benefit of a virtual exercise, of course, is people can be anywhere and everybody can participate, as opposed to I can't come into the office today, I can't do it. Now, there are some exercises that lend themselves to be done in real time. It depends how many people. And so I compare it to what I call a component exercise might be one plan, but an integrated exercise might be 20 plans. Now, I find integrated exercises work really well in a virtual world as long as everything is structured, right? Versus a one plan, an element plan that can be done fairly easily. At the end of the day, and it doesn't matter how you do your exercises, take the time to do it, plan it out, get senior leadership there, get the executive sponsor there. These people need to see the work people are doing and how they're preparing and how they're feeling comfortable going through these exercises, ensuring that the plan can be operationalized when needed. Keyword there, I can operationalize my plan when needed to meet the defined service level.
And don't be afraid to include those executives in your exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. And in virtual exercises, even though we're not doing things, I like to include real props, use images. There's lots of things you can get these days to make things come alive in PowerPoint, explosions, videos, and the more you introduce those into your exercises, they start to feel it. Because I read this article a long time ago, and it's so true. And I'll even say it for the flat tire. People that have done those things are the first to do them in a crisis. People that have managed crises real time surface to become leaders during crises. They're not afraid to roll up their sleeves and do, because they know what it feels like. So when you do a virtual exercise or a real-time exercise, make it feel real the best way you can, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll leave you with, don't be afraid to make it spontaneous and a surprise exercise. I find these exercises we do are just becoming too easy. And to your point earlier, Alex, it's the checkbox.
Yeah. It's coming across that a lot lately. COVID has proven how many organizations had a checkbox mentality. Let's move on to the next one, climate change and business continuity.
Right. So if we've learned anything, COVID-19 is a great symbol for the unexpected. And I think climate change has been around. We haven't been paying much attention to it, but lately we've seen some pretty strange weather. I'll try to keep climate change a little bit shorter, but I think that practitioners definitely need to communicate to their leaders that climate change is a business risk and it's now. We need to do something about it. So where does business continuity and climate change intersect? Well, in the short term, today, we really need to manage the impacts of severe weather caused by climate change, because that's what's starting to happen, right? Mm-hmm. We're getting these weather events that are occurring that are just not, we're getting that 100-year storm 4 times a year. Yeah. So if your assets are exposed, we now need to do something about it. So sustainability then says, well, if that area continues to flood, maybe we better move that operation to a flood-free zone. You either adapt or you move. Business continuity is adapting to the impacts of climate change. Adaptability, adapting to it is sustainability. So if I think about transit very quickly, when it gets really hot, the rails start to warp a little bit because of the steel. So the trains have to run slower. This is any railway will tell you this. It's railway in 101. Now, how do you solve that? You change the steel in the rail to a different type of steel that doesn't warp in high temperature, so the trains can perform as normal. But you can't just go out and change all the tracks around the world or in your backyard that quickly. That's sustainability. That's something you need to plan for long term. So business continuity is really short term. And I'll give you a really other quick example about this. Data centers, they're becoming smaller. The equipment's becoming hotter. The HVAC system has to manage the great heat inside, but now it also has to manage the great heat outside. So it's DR by design. We have to build these things right today for the future tomorrow. And I think that really pulls it all together. And our last topic was exercises. I love every exercise I do now. It's not just about one thing, it's about four things. And the day starts with, it's going to be a heat wave today at 96 degrees. And people say, oh, well, okay, what's the big deal? But then as your exercise evolves, that heat in that day starts to play in, because we always forget about the cascading effect of events. We learned through COVID, how do we fight fires during COVID? Or how do you recover, when there's lots of people, when you're, you've got to start layering these events in your exercises. And climate changes, the impacts of severe weather is a great one. So, and I'm going to leave you with, ask this question. Could climate change have caused the pandemic? That's the question. You don't need to answer it, but think about that.
Mm-hmm. Next topic, and I'm really interested to hear what your thoughts on this one is, industry certifications and standards.
So industry certifications and standards. I'm going to talk a bit more on certifications because standards really don't mean, I've done a lot of studies in standards, and to me, they mean all the same thing. The important thing is adopt the standard, follow the framework. And if you're rich enough as an organization, I wouldn't even say to certify to that standard unless you absolutely have to, because you're an airplane manufacturer or whatever. But post this pandemic, absolutely, professionals are in demand, and many sectors are requiring this professional certification to be in their portfolio because they're now realizing the value that business continuity has. Like, we're still not revenue generating, we're not insurance, we're not auditors, we're superheroes protecting the business. And this pandemic has brought that forward. And yes, it can, promote your credibility in the work you do, and it's great for networking and so on and so forth. And certification, demonstrates your commitment to the practice. But for me, Alex, in my opinion, having experience is much more important than the certification. That's just me, right? Experience can trump your academic studies and being certified, but the hands-on approach to learning and responding to business disruption is really, really important. Having that knowledge, having the skills, the critical thinking, the incident management, the decision-making, team building, problem solving, as I said earlier, unless you're living through those events, you don't get that. And I've been to, I see a lot of students coming out of emergency management, education, wanting to do what we do, and they have all this theory, but they have to apply the theory to the real event, and there's a disconnect there. It'll come in time, don't get me wrong, it will surface. But to me, if I was hiring tomorrow and you were a practitioner and you talked about living through 9/11 and SARS and other major events and labor disruption, to me that's invaluable. Now, I would then suggest maybe you should get certified, because I think that would be a good benefit to bridge that in. But I'm a half glass full on the experience side, Alex.
I agree with you, because I've run into some people who don't have the experience, but they've got the certification. I'm going, well, that's, are you sure? That doesn't seem to be balanced out right. I personally would rather see the experience, come into it, because the examples you gave, I'm talking to someone who's gone through SARS or 9/11 or other situations. Wow, that, what can I learn from you? What did you do? I find that incredibly valuable, but it's interesting. There are a lot of people now who are looking at certifications as people who might not have thought about it before are definitely looking at it like, wow, all the experience I have, I can apply for this now.
And certification is a really good leadway into the next topic when I talk about the right stuff, because experience is good, certification, education, all that stuff is fine, but are you the right individual to be in the practice, right? So, yep. So if you want to be a pilot in an airplane, that's wonderful, but if you're afraid of heights, maybe not, right? So, and I call this the right stuff because I wrote an article, Tom Wolfe's book, on the US space program. He called it The Right Stuff. It was released in 1983. And I always found that very interesting about ordinary people. They were selected to share this ambition of going into space and being the right type of person. And I personally believe that if you're going to be the right type of person as a business continuity practitioner, and I can throw that into ITDR, incident management, you need to have certain skills to meet the baseline of being the right stuff to be, that person. When we just talked about all our previous topics here, and even the last one around standards. I mean, you've got to have project management, time management, facilitation skills, negotiation skills. You got to be able to build solid relationships, one-on-one and groups. You got to be able to do this, talking, in a virtual webinar and evangelizing. You've got to be seen as, you're passionate. You got to turn that on inside of you. You've got to, because everybody does this off the side of the desk. If you can't motivate them to do it, you're not going to get it done. Going back to the policy, the KPIs, the standards, all those things we talked about, it just doesn't come together. We are the glue. The practitioner, the program is what brings it all together at the end of the day. And you got to be able to function with no support, because as you know, usually you're a team of 1 or 2 or 3, depends where you are, right? And you've got to be available all the time, because people may give you the time at the end of the day or the weekend to do the work, and you've got to dig deep and do that. And not to mention when incident happens 7/24, we're global now, e-commerce, rely on vendors. We just got to be able to bring it all together. We have to bridge this whole thing that people don't get, that business continuity is rooted in risk management. We're a control, and we need to be able to connect all this. My advice to people out there, I don't even talk about business continuity anymore. I talk about resiliency and risk. And inside there lives business continuity. The board loves hearing from me when I talk about that. But if I try to get on their calendar about business continuity, they go, yeah, we'll try to get you on there. But I talk about resiliency and risk, then it's a totally different. And the other thing about being the right stuff, and I remember going to a university and giving a lecture on this, if you're not prepared to engage people to do the work the right way and not the easy way, and or back to KPIs, throw your stakeholders, forgive me for saying this, under the bus when the work isn't getting done or escalating, you're not the right person. I mean, I will tell you that, I've seen VPs walk away from me in the days when we used to walk in the halls of the offices because they know
that too.
They haven't got the work done. And, to me, we're just the middle people trying to deliver it, facilitate the work getting done. So you have to be able to report, write it, call people out, go beyond the call of duty to get the work done, because that's what we're hired to do, right, Alex? We're hired to deliver these programs. And that's why if it's not on your PMP, then I struggle with that. If I need to get you to do this work, it's not on your PMP, there's no skin in the game for you.
Yeah. So we cannot be afraid to we can't be afraid to open the can of worms. We have to open those cans of worms when we need to.
And I go back to evidence-based program planning. When you're in the witness stand and you say, well, Bob said, or Carol said they didn't have time to do it, so I didn't push him. You're going to be not in a good place, where I'd rather say, well, I sat outside the office for 3 times and they didn't respond, and they didn't respond to my emails. I escalated to their boss, and they really didn't do much about it. Oh, thanks, Alex. Please sit down. Who's your boss? Oh, Bill's your boss. Bill, so what did you do about it? You knew this was a risk to the business. It's a control. We need to mitigate it.
Yeah.
So I don't want to sound negative with that, but you've got to be able to project manage these things with success in mind. So relationship building, team building, communications, having a good attitude, those are all things that will drive the results that you need.
So let's move to our last one, because we've only got just over 4 minutes left.
Okay.
And the last one is personal preparedness.
Now, this is a really important one. And for me, when I think of personal preparedness, I think about making sure that myself and my family were prepared before an incident occurs, during an incident occurs, or after the incident. Emergency, disaster can be man-made. It can be person-made, or a natural disaster. And it's like, I'm going to go grab my 72-hour bag and I'm going to rely on my own. And by the way, Hurricane Katrina taught us that it's no longer 72 hours. It needs to be like 7 days, And
Yeah.
so there's lots of different things that happen. So to me, it's really about ensuring that you are okay, because any successful business continuity plan, incident response plan, relies on two things: how well your plan is and the people you need to find in the plan to act as responders, right? So if you are not personally in the right state of mind, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to do your job under adverse conditions. Now, I'll give you a great example. Hurricane Katrina in 2005, because I was telecom then, Bell South in the US, their staff was all over the place. Their central offices were underwater. They quickly pulled a rabbit out of a hat and built a tent city for their key employees. And they brought all their families into this tent city, gave them food, water, everything they needed, and cell phones. And then they took the staff back to work, because the staff knew that their families were safe and they were being taken care of, and they could go off and do their jobs. And this is really important. Now, there's lots of different flavors of that. If Alex is a very unique person with a unique skill set, and when my business is having trouble because of an incident, I need Alex here, but Alex lives out in the country. Well, let's move Alex's family to the hotel across the street from the office. So Alex doesn't have to worry about his family. They've got everything they need. Give them the Amex card and they're good to go. And when Alex is done after working his 12-hour day, he doesn't have to drive 2 hours to get home, because I need him back here.
Or not at all.
Or, now virtual environments, excluding virtual environments, but this is all about taking care of your employees to make sure that they're available. And another one we used to do is we have a lot of non-essential staff, right? Business continuity, BIAs, people that we worry about, work we worry about, then there's the work we don't worry about. What about assigning some of those staff to your place out in the country and be with your family, so there's people there to help them? Because I don't know about you, Alex, but I've lived through a few incidences where people have just simply said, I'm out of here. Period.
Yeah, I've known a couple of people who've done that too. And we only have one minute left, by the way.
So I leave you with that. I mean, I think you really got to take care of your staff to make sure that they're highly available to support your work. And you have to find ways of doing that. Get HR involved, get management involved, because without your people, your plan ain't going anywhere.
Yeah, it won't get done. It won't get executed. It won't. Without your people, you've got nothing.
Yeah. So your people are very important to your plan. I know we're running out of time, but there's so many stories with 9/11. I can't begin to tell you how the human element of all this plays into, the success of your plan. So all this work, all this preparation that you've done, working hard, can all come crashing down because the people just don't show up, or they're not prepared to work. Yeah. Thank you, Alex, so much for having me into your world and sharing these thoughts and ideas. And I hope your delegates out there take something away and build on it. Even one little thing, I'd be so happy.
I think so. There was some good comments there, especially with the KPIs and things like that. Get away from that tick box mentality of measurement. I think that was a really interesting one. And you gave a lot of great examples and all the subjects we talked about here. So I think there's lots for people to take away. So Vito, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise and time. And it was great to finally have you on the show, knowing that I've seen your name so many times over the years. So it's nice to finally actually have you here.
And I hope I get the opportunity maybe to come back to deal with a very specific topic you may have. But thank you very much, Alex. Remember, be positive and test negative.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good one. And my closing comment, everybody watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody.
I love it.
If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave a message and let me know what your thoughts are. If you'd like to be a guest on the show to talk about something related to business continuity, disaster management, COVID, personal well-being, anything that's relatable to those subjects, you can reach me through my LinkedIn profile, which is in the video description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. In the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.